Welcome to Quality Time with MoreSteam. I am your host, Dan Swartwout. Before we get started with this episode of the podcast, I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and feedback on the first 12 episodes of Quality Time with MoreSteam. I very much appreciate it, and we'll continue to bring great episodes about the world of continuous improvement, process improvement. We'll continue to bring episodes like that to you every 2 weeks here on Quality Time with MoreSteam. A few episodes ago, you might remember, I interviewed Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt Ken Robinette. In addition to his many accomplishments in the world of continuous improvement, Ken is also MoreSteam's Vice President of Business Development. And on August 13th, 2024, Ken gave a presentation at the dinner meeting of the ASQ Columbus Section. Ken's presentation was titled Revolutionizing Process Improvement with the Power of Generative AI and Large Language Models. On the ASQ website, the presentation was described in part as dive into how AI is reshaping the tools and techniques we have available for improving organizational processes. The discussion will explore several opportunities that AI brings to the table, from refining problem statements and project charters to optimizing data pre-processing and aiding in root cause analysis to accelerating affinitization sessions post-brainstorming. Those are a lot of multi-syllable words, so you know this is going to be a high-quality, very intellectual presentation. And on this episode of Quality Time with MoreSteam, we will bring you highlights from Ken's presentation from August 13th. And I will jump in from time to time to give my commentary and introduce the next clip. First, Ken answered the question, what is generative AI?
I'm going to ask ChatGPT, what is AI? So what you'll notice, it's got that little knot over there to the left. Up here, it says, what is generative AI? Please be brief. That was my prompt. I typed that into ChatGPT. Now, when I first typed, what is AI? I didn't put please be brief. And it gave me a lot of stuff. I was like, well, this is what it got into talking about neural networks and what language it is and Python. And I'm like, no. This isn't what I need. I need to know. Let's just talk about some basics. So I said, please be brief. So one of the things you're going to see as I talk through this presentation is this technology is pretty interesting, but it's only as good as the prompt you ask it. And if you ask bad prompts, you're setting yourself up to maybe get information that doesn't make sense to what you are actually looking for. I'll demonstrate some of that to you in a little bit later. So the first prompt I said was, what is generative AI? And that's a big topic, right? So it gave me a lot. It was actually like 3 full pages it brought back, and it was a lot of information. So I said, please be brief. This is what it actually brought back. It brought back a paragraph. And the key to note here is that I could have went on to Google. I could have Googled AI, and it would have brought back a bunch of bullet points with a bunch of different resources. And then I would have had to go on and click through those and read and edit and try to figure out what I wanted to put into the paragraph. So for me as a user, this ChatGPT or the other names, and I'll get them wrong, but that's the one I use from time to time. I probably use it 2 to 3 times a week. It puts it in something that you can kind of wrap your mind around. So this is what it spit out. Generative AI refers to artificial intelligence systems that create new content, such as text, images, music, or code. 4 very distinct things. Notice it doesn't say math, doesn't solve mathematical equations very well, it doesn't do math well. By learning patterns from existing data. What do I mean by existing data? Some folks will say, well, just whatever's on the web. Yes, the web. Also, anything that's been turned digital and is in text, books, research papers, anything in the public sphere, any government documents that have been released. So if you've been around continuous improvement, you think about training within industry and all of that wonderful information that's out there with training within industry, it has access to that. It goes in there and it pulls information out of there. So it's taking all these different sources of digital information and it's trying to give you an answer to the prompt based on the patterns that it's noticed on how words get used together. So these models generate outputs that resemble human created content. So really, It's only as smart as the humans who turned everything into digital information and put it out there so they can go find it and match it up and do different things. So it's the old adage, and I love to use this one. If you put crap into an automated computer, what comes out? Crap faster. So when you're using AI, make sure you know what you're asking for and what you're trying to do, and always make sure you look at it and it makes sense.
Thank you, Ken, for keeping it safe for work. In the next clip, Ken comments on the things generative AI can do, such as text generation. He also highlights that AI is not static. Instead, AI continues to evolve as the sources of information grow.
Text generation, image synthesis, and music composition. So it can do things. It can create things. It can like look for the patterns. So it's not static. It's not static. And I'll give you an example of something that's like a static technology here in a minute, but it's not static because the more people who use it and the more people who ask questions and the more times it gets to practice and the more data that gets put out into the places it can find, it's continually learning because we're continuing to generate. I mean, how many data centers around the city of Columbus do we need? The answer is not enough. We don't have enough yet. They're still building them, right? And what are they? I mean, all that are in there is bits and bytes, AWS, Facebook. I mean, think about all the things that are in those data centers around town. That's what this is going out and pulling from. And the more data that goes in there, the more opportunity it gets to learn.
We know what generative AI is. We also know that generative AI continues to evolve. Based on that, what are the top 3 applications for generative AI, and how does Ken use generative AI at his job?
So, what are the top 3 applications? And you can see it came back. It said content creation, writing, and copywriting. So it's really, really good, way better than me at the English language. It's really good at writing stuff, knowing how words should go together, creating content. And so I said I use it 2 to 3 times a week. When I've got like something I'm like struggling with and I was going to go do Google, instead of doing Google and getting all those bullet points and trying to put it all together, I'll go here first now. So how I'm using it is to, right now, an MBB phrase, I'm trying to get directionally correct. So I'm going to type in my prompt. I'm going to read it. We all have biases. We're humans, right? So if it gives me something back that matches my bias, I tend to use it and move forward. Well, that's a blind spot, but I'm thinking all the information it has to get a hold of is better than my little pea brain. So I use it. That's what I do. So if it makes sense to my bias, I use it. If it doesn't, I'm like, maybe I better prompt it again, or maybe I'll go back and do Google, or maybe I'll ask somebody that I think maybe knows more about the topic than I do. So that's kind of how I use it in my job in sales.
This is my prompt for the next clip from Ken's presentation. What are some ways in which organizations are currently using generative AI?
MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, pretty well-known place that does a lot of stuff. So in an insight survey completed last year, 2023, MIT went out and talked to a bunch of people in these various areas. And this is what each area had to say about where they're applying AI. And this survey was done at the C-suite level. So this is at the top of our organizations. This is what they're talking about. So if I look at retail and consumer goods, supply chain optimization, anybody work in a company that's had any supply chain issues in the last, say, since the Rona came to town? Anybody? So why are people using AI to try to address supply chain? Because supply chains have gotten so complicated and there's so much stuff going on. How do you get enough information to even get your mind around what is it we're trying to do? Personalization and customer experience. I did this little experiment at the little company I work for. We had done some customer surveys. If you've ever used our products, we often ask for folks to give us a comment when they go through a lean training, or if they touch one of our products. We had this bunch of comments, just random comments from customers, and it came in line by line by line, customer from customer from customer. And I wasn't really worried about the one-off comment from a specific person. So I took the whole data set, I put in a chat GPT and I said, can you affinitize or group this data for me? And there was probably 1,200, 1,300 individual lines of data that a human could have sat down and tried to figure out. But it went through and it read it and it started grouping them up. So that 12 or 1,300 lines of data came out to be 5 key things that we need to do better. So now I can get my mind around it. So how did I use it? I used it to triage the information. I used it to help me be more efficient, to react faster, because that's what computers do. If we think about if you were a machinist and you used to set up the old Bridgeport mill, and now you've got a CNC mill, you can replicate, you can change, you can go, what's the computer's taking some of that guesswork, some of that manual effort out of it.
How can you make generative AI work for you? In this next clip, Ken explains how his experimentation with generative AI has made him more effective.
These are things that you may not have thought about in the past that you should think about now. I wouldn't be afraid of AI. I wouldn't avoid AI. I would embrace it and experiment and toy with it and see if it can help you be more effective. Okay. I'm a pretty good speaker. I can make up stories. I can tell you, I'll try to read the language here and try to keep you engaged. I suck at writing emails. I come off brass. I come off short. I come off too engineering like. That's what happens. So I'll write a letter. I'm all right. Say I've got some sort of an issue. I've got to approach a customer about a price increase. I learned pretty quick as I've gone from being an engineer and an MBB to in the sales world. You can't say, hey, it's time for that price increase. Everybody else is up 20%. You're up 20%. This just doesn't work. So what do? I go to ChatGPT. I say, well, I've got a customer. We've had really good service with them, but they're kind of demanding. I give them a prompt and then I put my letter in there. And then they come back and they'll give me an evaluation. Well, you might want to, and it rewrites it. And I'll read it. I'll say, well, can you make it a little more salesy? This is a prompt I actually use. Can you make it more salesy? And it'll bring it back. So I'm prompting it. And what am I doing? I'm doing the cycles in my mind and I'm letting it like put the words together because it's really good at putting words together. And so what am I trying to avoid? Teeing off the customer about price increase. I'm trying to use technology to make sure that my own shortcomings don't like carry over, right? So anyway, just a personal example. I'll give you another one later, but this is how you can use this stuff.
Speaking of price increases, we unfortunately have to double the cost of the next episode of Quality Time with MoreSteam. Now, AI isn't great at math, but I bet it will be able to tell you what is the double of 0. I apologize for the interruption. Now back to Ken with more on how he uses generative AI.
So it's like, all right, it said it can do images. So how am I using this? I also stink at making graphics for PowerPoint slides, and I have to do a lot of presentations. So guess what I do? Hey, this is what I'm thinking. What might an image look like? And I let it do what I'm not. I am not an artist. I drew with like triangles and squares, and then I went to a Sun Spark system, and I dragged and dropped, and I labeled. So the ability to think in this kind of way, I don't do it well. Guess what? This works pretty well. And you'll see on inside of the Microsoft products, because Microsoft has its own AI running, you'll see this Copilot concept. And I've used Copilot inside of PowerPoint. And, it took my bullet pointed, and Copilot says, would you like some graphics to support your bullets? And it like made like a diagram and it puts the words underneath of it, and it totally changed it around. And like I submitted the document back to my marketing counterpart. I was preparing the speech for it was actually ASQ Phoenix, which is one of the bigger meetings. And I mean, my presentation was all words. There was no graphics. She says, this is so dry. They're going to be so bored. I'm like, well, you're in marketing. I'm in sales. I talk. You're supposed to do this. I don't have time. Guess who had time? ChatGPT. So off we went. So these are another example of how you can use these things to make you better. Is it my stuff? No, but the words were, the thoughts were. So I didn't really care. I needed the graphics to pull the audience in. I knew what I was going to say. I knew what I was going to talk about, but I don't do that well. So This is ways you can experiment. And why can you experiment doing stuff like this? Because the risk is so low. I want you to make graphics. I'm going to put my PowerPoint slide. It's not like you're stealing confidential information. It's not like you're putting confidential information out there. It's things you can do to learn and to judge and to develop that don't cause a lot of security reviews and legal reviews and, the reviews.
Thanks, Ken. If you have saved us from even just one boring PowerPoint presentation, you have performed a valuable service on this episode of Quality Time with MoreSteam. This podcast. Podcasts. 20 years ago, nobody had ever heard of them. Now they're everywhere. Technology is moving faster than ever before, and you've got to keep pace if you want to stay ahead.
This is what I've experienced in my career working when we talk about technology. There's iterative technology, there's disruptive technology, and there's transformational technology, right? So there's times when whatever you were doing before is completely removed from what you would ever do again. That's transformative, right? So I always like to tell the story about Smith and Corona and the typewriter. They made a really, 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 really good typewriter. The world is now digital. And this is from business school, which is a while ago. The mistake that Smith and Corona made was they identified themselves as a typewriter company, not a data or text or information company. So they got really good at making people's fingers make keys go really fast and put stuff down on paper. But where we went with word processors and PCs and where we're at now, that it's not needed. That's been completely transformed. That doesn't exist. Disruptive, one could argue that electric vehicles might be disruptive to combustion vehicles. It's different, right? Folks could argue that a bus is disruptive to a train, maybe, because you're still taking mass people. There's disruptive things, and it happens in all of our businesses all the time. Iterative means it went from a cell phone to a smartphone. The batteries got smaller, but in general, you're still kind of in the same thing. It's just getting better over time. So technology has been going on since probably Jesus walked the earth. Yes, things have been changing. We just got fire. We did this, blah, blah, blah. The dinosaurs maybe didn't do all that. But since humans have been walking the earth, we've been applying technology or finding new ways. So to think that technology change is going to stop is an unrealistic expectation. It is going to continue. Application and adoption are the keys to developing a new, improved future state. How we apply what we figured out changes what the future looks like. And it's vital that we get it right. So if we miss something or we don't apply it, if you've got a competitor out there and this new technology might give them a significant advantage over where you're at, and you're standing back, holding back, thinking, well, I'm going to wait, they could get far enough ahead that the sprint at the end, you're not going to catch them. It's Olympic season, right? So they're saying, oh, they're going to win. Oh, they didn't win. Like the one American who came from nowhere and won the 1500 meter because the two world record holders busy battling one another, yelling at one another, and who wins? The American out of the middle, right? So that's a classic example of, what do you got to do, how to do it, get it right. So back to my calculator example. 1975, kind of introduced for general use. So and this is considered by most standards, this was considered a pretty fast adoption of technology. But it took 11 years to get to 200 million users. 200 million units, that means users. And we were even slower to adapt it to applying it to like important things like people taking the SAT, 2002. Okay? By most standards, calculators are considered to be a fast rate of adoption of technology. Everybody agree with that statement? I know Doug's in education. I've dabbled in education. Education was scared to death of the calculator. And you can see all the way to 2002 before it was allowed to be used as a tool to help folks perform on a test that determines, can you go forward? Yet in that same time, by 2002, every company was on PCs. Every company was using computer-aided design. Every company was using technology, but we've still gone to the pencil and the paper to do the math until you got through the SAT and maybe still in college in some places. But the significance of that 200 million, ChatGPT launched November of 2022. 100 million users, February of 2023. 200 million users, August. Right now, August 2024. 200 million users. Technology is moving faster than ever before.
Wow, ChatGPT already has 200 million users. Maybe one day Quality Time with MoreSteam will have 200 million listeners. Hopefully, we don't lose you as a listener during this short break. MoreSteam's enterprise process improvement platform includes the tools, training, and software you need to transform your organization into a problem-solving powerhouse. Join the ranks of Fortune 500 companies that trust MoreSteam for their enterprise process improvement. Our integrated approach featuring training, project tracking and execution, simulations, and statistical analysis empowers your team to create a culture where structured problem solving becomes second nature. Visit moresteam.com to learn more. Like technology, MoreSteam continues to evolve. How is MoreSteam using generative AI to make the world of continuous improvement better for you? Here, Ken tells us how.
We have our friend Hexy. Hexy's in our products. We're running Hexy. If a company says, yes, I'm willing to use AI in my products, we can turn Hexy on. What we do with Hexy is kind of interesting. So if I type a prompt, I'm a student, I'm taking Greenbelt class, and I'm on some page, pick whatever page you want it to be. I'm on affinity diagrams. I'm on the affinity diagram page. I'm asking a question. Hexy knows I'm on the affinity diagram page. So there's already prompts in the back or information in the back that I'm a student, I'm looking at this, I'm learning this. So whatever prompt that the student types, we're making the prompt better on the back side so that it goes, we're kind of trying to steer it to get the best answer possible back to that student. That's how we're using it in products. That's how people are using it in products are doing. That's exactly what the big guys are doing. That's how you have a co-pilot. Because you're asking the question, we've put some information behind that's going to connect to your prompt, and it's going to get you a better response. Because good prompts in give you good answers back. So how do we make our students smart enough to ask good questions? We fill out most of the prompt and we let them put in a little piece.
Thanks, Ken. That was a tremendous presentation. If you ever have the chance to see Ken Robinette speak in person, do yourself a favor and take advantage of that opportunity. Ken is a great public speaker who always provides very valuable, useful information. Ken speaks on topics related to continuous improvement all across the country. And this time, a special thank you to the Columbus section of ASQ for having Ken as a guest back in August. And thank you for listening to Quality Time with MoreSteam. You can email the show at qualitytime@moresteam.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast service. Also, please go ahead and visit our website, moresteam.com, to learn about the software and tools that can help you solve problems, eliminate waste, and do things better. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more Quality Time with MoreSteam. Thanks again.